In addition to changing the settings for your own profile and the profiles of the other people you let use your WordPress installation, we can change the settings for WordPress itself. This is done under the Settings option and General. We've already looked at some of these settings previously. Here you see we have the site title and tagline, which we could also configure from the customizer. You also have an email address. Now, this is the same email address as your admin email address that you use to set up the account. Now, this is the email address WordPress will use to notify you about things that happen on the site, let's say updates or comments that are held for moderation and things like that. You might want to change this if you don't want those emails to land in your inbox, but it's important to have an email address that works here. Previously, we addressed the anyone can register option. By default, it's set to off, and unless you want people to be able to register for your site, you should leave it off. If you do activate it, be careful that the new user default role is set to subscriber, so that people don't get more privileges than they should have. Now let's take a look at the rest of these features, starting with these two, WordPress address URL and site address URL. By default, these are set to wherever you installed WordPress, and in most cases, that's how they should stay. The reason why you have two lines here is because in some rare cases, you may want to place WordPress in its own folder and then display it as if it was living in a different folder. In those cases, you would put in one address for WordPress address and another for the site address. This is a custom situation, and if you want to apply that situation, you should go check out the article linked right here to be different from the directory, and it'll take you to the Codex article that explains how to do this. But like I said, in most cases, that's an advanced option you don't need to use. Scrolling down, you have your time zone. Now this is the time zone that WordPress uses to count time. So right now, it's set to UTC +0, meaning this is basically Greenwich Mean Time. So if I set a post to publish at noon on Friday, it'll publish at noon on Friday in England. But I'm not in England, I'm in Vancouver in Canada. So I'm going to change this to where I am. So I'm going to type in Vancouver and look, Vancouver is on the list. Now, depending on where you live, your city might not be on the list. And in that case, you can find the standard UTC time, or you can find a time to the time zone that you're currently in, like another city that's close by you. You can also choose to change how the date format is displayed. By default, it's the American Standard, December 20th, 2013, but you can change it to a multitude of different standards. For example, if you live in Norway, you'd probably change it to 2012-2013. This is completely up to you. You can also change it to your own custom format if you want to by using the custom feature and reading the documentation for that. The same goes for time. By default, time is displayed in the American Standard, AM and PM in lowercase, but you can change it to any of these other standards if you want to. Finally, you can choose what day of the week you want the week to start on. This affects the calendar within WordPress, and if you display the calendar in your sidebar, for instance, this affects any calendar you may use inside WordPress. So for example, if you display the WordPress calendar as a widget in your sidebars or footers, then this will impact what day is set as the start day of the week. By default, it's Monday, but you can change it to another day if you want to. Once you've made changes to these settings, remember to click Save Changes to apply them. Now let's also look briefly at the writing settings. This page allows you to change things like whether or not WordPress should auto-format emoticons into actual graphics, so I'm going to turn that off. You can also get WordPress to correct invalidly nested XHTML automatically. If you're going to paste a lot of HTML into your content, you may want to do this just so that any errors get caught. But this is a rare occurrence, especially nowadays, because no one writes XHTML anymore. So this is more of a legacy option for older blog posts. This is also where you'll remember you can set the default post category that we changed earlier in the course, and you can also set the default post format. This Press This option is actually a bookmark that you can add to your toolbar in your browser. And that way, if you find something interesting online, you can simply click the Press This button and it'll allow you to push that content directly to your blog right away. This is a custom option for people who blog a lot. I've never really used it because I don't create content this way, but if that's something that sounds like it matters to you, then try it and see what happens. Below Press This, you have this Post via email option, and this is interesting. If you're out traveling or you're not able to access the WordPress interface for some reason, you can set this up so that you can email yourself, and then that email becomes a post on your site. This requires that you wire your email server to WordPress, and this requires a bit of a setup to make it work. But once it works, it actually works quite well, so you'll be able to email your site and automatically get updates on the front page. This is a very blog-focused feature, so I don't see a lot of people use it, but the ones that do are able to do some pretty cool things with it. At the very bottom, you see this title that says Update Services, and right now it says WordPress is not notifying any update service because of your site's visibility settings. Now, when I installed WordPress on my local server, I didn't check the box at the bottom during the install that said list this site on Google and other search engines. I intentionally didn't do that because as I'm building out my site, I don't want the search engines to index the content I'm putting in the site as I'm building it out because I might be experimenting and changing things. Now that I'm ready to take my site live, I can change these settings so that my site becomes visible for search engines. So I'm going to click on this link that goes to visibility settings, and this takes me to the reading panel. Here at the bottom, you see that currently search engine visibility is set to discourage search engines from indexing this site. Now that I want to take my site live, I'm going to uncheck that, and that way search engines will be able to access my site and will be able to index the content. I'll click Save Changes, and then I can go back to my writing settings. Now at the bottom here, you'll see I'll be able to add update services to my site. These are services that will be notified every time I make a change to my site. By default, the only service you have is this Ping-O-Matic service, but you can add additional services if you want to. I usually add all the available update services that are suggested in the codex by following this link. I'll open it in a separate tab here, scrolling down, and simply copying out this whole list. So I'll copy the list and just paste it in. And now, whenever I make an update to my site, be that a new post or a new page or a new comment comes in, all of these different services will be notified of this new content, and this will encourage some search engines to index my site better. Finally, let's take a brief look at that reading page. When we were in here to encourage search engines to index the site, you may have noticed that it started with front page displays. This is another of those settings that you also find in the customizer. This is its original location, so this is where you use to change that setting. The reading page is also where you control how many posts are displayed on the index pages of your site. By default, it's set to 10, meaning for every index page you see 10 posts, and then there's a next link. You can change this to any number. I like to set it to 12 because I find 12 to be a better number. And this is also where you can set the syndication feed. So that would be if someone is subscribing to your site using an RSS feed. You can change the number of posts that are in that feed here as well. Finally, you can decide if you want the full text or just a summary to be in your RSS feed. Now, this is important if you have advertising on your site, because if you have advertising, you probably want people to come and see the actual site and not just read your content in an RSS reader. If you have advertising on your site, or if you have another reason that you want people to actually come visit your site, I suggest setting it to summary. But if you just want to ensure that people are able to read your content and disseminate it throughout the web, I suggest setting it to full text. It's completely up to you, and it depends on your use scenario. Like with all the other settings in WordPress, these require a bit of experimentation. But now you know what they do and how you can configure them. So now you can configure them to fit with your needs.